Good evening and welcome to the meeting of the Community Preservation Committee, September 27th, 2022. We are meeting on Zoom rather than in person right now to facilitate the many different neighbors and citizens of Concord who have an interest in this undertaking. And this just simply makes it a little bit easier and a little bit more facile during this still slightly COVID time to be able to do the meeting we need to do. There has been some sentiment among our committee to meet in person. And as we see how the winter goes, we'll consider that and see what we can do. I want to particularly thank Ann Clifford for setting up some terrific site visits this week. They were just terrific this last Saturday and the one this afternoon, because they make a big difference in our ability to make wise and thoughtful deliberations. So, Anne, thank you very much from all of us. I mean, that was terrific. We'll call roll, and what you do is you say your name and then you say what is your appointing body. So we'll start. Andrew, you're muted.
Andrew Boardman, Planning Board.
Thank you, Andrew. Sarah.
Sarah Grimwood, appointee of the Natural Resources Commission.
Thank you, Sarah. Paul.
Paul Baum, appointed by the Recreation Commission.
Thank you. Eve. Oh, you're muted again, hon.
So sorry. My name is Eve Eisenberg, and I was appointed by the town selectmen.
Select board.
Select board.
Yeah. Yeah. Nancy Nelson.
Nancy Nelson, Historical Commission representative.
John Cratsley. John, you're muted too.
John Cratsley, appointed by the Select Board.
You would think after 2 years, you guys would have this down. We're going to have to get little t-shirts that say, please unmute me. Burton. No, Burton, you're muted.
You're muted.
Burton Flynn, Select Board appointee.
Thank you. And Charles.
Charles Phillips, Housing Authority appointee.
Thank you. And Diane Proctor, Select Board appointee. We have a set series of deliberations, but before we do, I want to make reference to something indicated in the minutes, which we will review later on in this meeting, that would suggest that what we were going to be doing tonight, among other things, was to be reviewing the budget surpluses or residue monies that might be left from old projects, and be able to look at some of those and highlight that spending process. Ann Clifford, who is a new person on the staff in Concord and who's very competent, thank you very much, has discovered enough complexities that she's going to need another month or so. Probably we'll do this in early November to try to get all the funding concerns clarified, and then she will present those to us and we can see where we are. So I'm sorry not to be able to do that tonight. It was certainly something we hoped to do. But if rushing that process would be silly because it would not be accurate. So we're giving Anne a chance to clarify where the money really is. And you will see as we move forward that that's going to be a particularly pertinent question for us in this coming year. So let's start. We will each presenter has 30 minutes. I don't think I'll be setting a stopwatch, but by any stretch of the imagination, but each one has 30 minutes for their presentation. And we're going to start with Nate Smith, one of our town's archivists, who's going to be talking about the preservation of historic town plans. Welcome, Nate.
Hello, thanks again for having me. It was nice to see you all in person on Saturday for the site visit. So the project I proposed in my application pertained to was the preservation of 2 sets of town plans. And I think Anne has some slides that she can show as I'm talking. So feel free to put those up at any point if they're available. But essentially there are 2 sets. So this first we're looking at here is the town plans that were compiled between 1907 and 1910. As you can see from the cover page there, we're pretty confident that these were kept in the select boardroom and referenced by the select board throughout their business, their meetings, etc. Not clear exactly when it was moved from the select board's room, selectmen's room, to the archives and the library vault, but it's been there since I started in 2019. And as far as anyone can remember, it had been there for a while. Certainly once we had more updated town plans, this would have become somewhat obsolete, except for as a reference point. So in terms of the project goals, as you can see on the left picture, there is some tearing. The way these plans are formed they're folded into this booklet. So there's some tearing, there's some folding, there's some general just wear and tear, there's some soiling or just dirtiness from people handling them. And attached to my application was I had this document brought to the Northeast Document Conservation Center, which is sort of a well-known local up in Andover institution that performs conservation services. And they've reviewed it and sort of provided their line-by-line recommendations as to what treatments this particular set of documents should undergo, what they would recommend so that we can preserve it for the long term. As part of that process, we would also get them digitized so that we could post them and make them more available. And also we could make prints that people could handle so that the original records will be cleaned and put in a box and stored. And then prints and digital versions can be shared and used. This particular set has come up pretty regularly. I'd say about once a month, someone's researching their property or some area of town, and they want to see, what did the parcels look like back in this era, and how has it changed since. This is one of the earliest, I think the earliest that we found so far, map or plan that shows the individual parcel lines across just about 90% of the town. Between the 7 sheets, it covers almost the whole town. And the parcel lines have obviously changed over the last 100+ years as people have bought land and separated and subdivisions and things. So it's a good reference point, and I think it has interest now, and I think making it more accessible, we'd have even more opportunities for people to use it as a research tool. So the goal is to get this treated, and if you want to go to the second slide, this is just a little more detail, zoomed in a little bit. So the left is the key, kind of shows you it was compiled by Frank Stickney. That's why we call them the Stickney maps. And then the right side kind of shows you that parcel by parcel detail, even shows the owners and the acreage for a lot of the parcels. So it's a unique resource to Concord that I think we want to keep in good repair, and then also create those digital versions that we can share more widely. The second set of records are a couple of plans. You can see here they're rolled together. I didn't particularly want to unroll them just because of the shape they're in, but they are plans of the Concord Waterworks from 1874 and 1875. We've had less research interest in these. They're not particularly well known, I don't think, and it would be a very niche researcher that would need them. But you can see from the sort of close-ups of the corners, they're in pretty rough shape. So we haven't handled them very much. And when we got them looked at, they did recommend a number of treatments. Again, cleaning, repairing. In this case, they would flatten it out and roll it out so that they could do the cleaning and the repair work. And then they would, once again, create a digital version that we could actually work with and use. And it is, again, a unique piece of Concord history. This was when the town was getting their water from Sandy Pond, which is in Lincoln. And there was a whole infrastructure around that. There were several acts of the legislature, the agreements between the towns to have that water supply and the way it all worked. So again, these were also drawn by William Wheeler, who has the Wheeler family, and William in particular has a pretty storied history across town, working for the town in that era. So these were, and the reason I selected these 2 sets, the first one, again, because of the interest and the heavy usage, I want to get those preserved and conserved, before they deteriorate further. And then these ones, sort of based on the age, less the usage, but more the age and the condition. These were prime candidates for some conservation work, preservation work, so that we can not lose these particular assets for the town archives.
Thank you, Nate. It is the habit of our committee, and maybe Anne can stop sharing now so we can all see each other. Thank you, Anne. It's the habit of our committee to ask one or two people to concentrate on any one project. And Andrew Boardman and I are concentrating on this particular project, and we'll begin the questions, and then we will turn to other people on our committee, and then to anybody in the public who has questions that they would like to ask. So as the chair, I'm going to exercise the prerogative of asking the first question, Nate. How many such antique documents do you have that are in this kind of potentially fragile to even more fragile conditions?
Sure. So I would say we don't have many, but that's not to say we won't find more. So these particular ones were found when we were cleaning out a particular corner of the water and sewer building. And, you know, someone was like, oh yeah, those are unique, you know, and we started talking about the backstory. I talked to Alan, who's our head of the CPW now. He was head of water and sewer at the time.
Alan Cathcart, I think you mean.
Alan Cathcart, yes, exactly. So then I learned more about the story of them, and then how old they might be, because, you know, when something's rolled like that, you don't necessarily know. So those in particular were sort of recent acquisitions, and they were stored in a closed cabinet. They were protected. They weren't out in the open. One of them was in a tube, so they were protected to some degree, but they weren't in the vault. And you know, so we talked about them. We moved them to the vault. So that type of thing could happen again. I'm always on the lookout. I'm always probing and asking questions whenever I go to a town building. You know, is there anything in the basement? Is there anything in the attic? And, you know, we found things, not too many. People are pretty good about it. A lot of departments know that now that I've been hired, that I'm a resource, and that we can move things to the library, into the vault, to store them. So we don't have a ton in this sort of shape. And I think the Stickney maps, the first set, are in the condition they're in because they were used so heavily. And so there's not a lot that fits this category, but there's a couple bound volumes, so not maps, but, you know, bound volumes of records that I would have to get them evaluated to see if they can be repaired. They've been microfilmed, so we have the content sort of saved for the long term, and we can digitize from that. But they are very old, and they were treated once already, so there may be very little that can happen there going forward. But certainly, as part of my position, you know, we had a preservation assessment done a couple years ago, and one of the goals of mine is to create a preservation plan so that I can catalog anything that shows signs of needing work, and then prioritize. These were the top two priorities, obvious to me, but there could be more that we kind of, as we catalog and inventory, we come across and are recommended in future years potentially for treatment.
Thank you, Nate. And when you speak of the vault, can you explain where the vault is?
Oh, sure. So the town shares the vault in special collections at the main branch of the library. There's an agreement between the town and the library to share that space. The town contributed a large sum in order to have it built when the library had a renovation, and I believe it was 1987. We actually just over the summer renewed that agreement, and we now also, the town archives utilizes some of the space at the Fowler branch as well, because the Fowler branch also has a vault. But when I talk about the vault, I'm talking about the special collections vault in the main branch.
Thank you very much. Andrew, you have to unmute.
Yeah, my question actually was slightly more, since we're altering the size of these documents and storing them more appropriately, is there a concern about space and space creep? But I guess you kind of answered that question when you said there was a location to move things to Fowler if needed.
Yeah, so we've actually, you know, so we share the space with the special collections. The library just underwent another renovation, and they actually added vault space, which was great. So the town doesn't have access to that side, but the special collections does, and they will use it to move some things, which will free up space for me to use. There's also, we've gone through a process of what we call weeding in the archives world, where we've realized we were keeping multiple copies of certain reports and certain other documents. Like when I say multiple, I mean like 7, 8, 10, in different places that we didn't really need to. So as we do that sort of level of cleanup, myself and the curator, Anka Voss, the curator for special collections, we are gaining space, and then utilizing Fowler as more of a resource. That vault is great. It has environmental controls, it has security, and it had been a little underutilized, I would say. And now that we have this agreement in place, both special collections and myself for the town archives are using that. And it's really helping us to really, have enough space and move things around appropriately.
Thank you. John Kratzley.
I noticed the time frame 1907 to 1910. Does this fill a gap? Are there records before 1907 and after 1910 that are in
Yes,
decent
so
shape or don't?
yeah, for the most part, we have the planning maps, and the maps after are in good shape. And we have different, we don't have one for every year, but we have many for each of the eras. I would say, like each decade, there's a set of maps that someone did. Some of them are more detailed for, some of them are, sorry, I'm thinking of the word. Some of them are less parcel based and real estate looking maps. They're more terrain and things like that. But there are maps of town essentially from then on. Then from before 1907, there really isn't anything that we have that covers the whole town or even a large section of town that shows the parcels. So that's kind of one of the aspects of this that's unique, is that they spent the time to compile all the individual parcel plans into this set of maps. You can always find an individual parcel if you do the research at the registry. If you do a title search for an individual parcel, you can almost always find a plan of that parcel, whenever there was a transfer. But that gets harder the further you go back, and it's only the one parcel. So if you wanted to do a neighborhood, for instance, you would have to look at you'd have to do almost a title search for every single parcel in that neighborhood and piece it together. So it's a nice, unique resource for the era, and just in general.
Does that answer your question, John?
It does. Thank you.
Terrific. Nate, I have another question, and that is that once you digitize these, if I were to come in and want to look at a replication of your work, could I see one that is as big as the one you have, or do I bring my little magnifying glass in and look at a tiny version of it? Because I found it fascinating to look at it on Saturday, but even at that, in its enlarged, form, it was not necessarily easy to read. So
yeah, so a couple things there. One is the specifications they would use to digitize it. You would be able to zoom in on it on a computer. So that's one aspect that we would get. But in terms of prints, so the town has some large format printers. I know the GIS office has one, and the engineering office. So they would be close, maybe not quite as big as the original. But if there was enough demand, we could certainly have a printer print off a couple or a dozen, and have them available for researchers. Or we could provide the digital file, and someone could create could print it themselves or have it printed themselves if they wanted a large blown up version.
or frame it and put it in some public place.
Sure, I'm open to that,
Would be fantastic. Beth, I'm going to ask the committee first, and then I'll get right to you. Okay, Nancy Nelson.
Nate, I was just wondering, well, first of all, I'm happy you're in touch with the New England Document Conservation Center. They're the best.
Yeah, they do great work.
That's really great. And the second thing is, I know a few years back, Lincoln did a lot of work with its ancient and falling apart plans and whatnot. And given that Sandy Pond was Concord's source, they might have information about how that water arrangement worked. That's just something maybe to check out in the future, but they did extensive work with their archives and collections.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, no, I know the archivist in Lincoln and the town clerk, and we share requests every once in a while when they cross. So definitely could look to them for some context around these plans.
That's great. Okay, that's all I had.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Paul.
Yeah, hi, Nate. I was thinking back to last year when Anka submitted her application was a bit of technology catch up. That some of these records have been on cassettes and we want to get them modernized. Is there a technology lag within the archives where some materials are stored on not so much up-to-date technology, and is it catch up beyond your project? Or I assume your project is in the leading edge of how they're going to be stored and digitized.
Yeah, so I would say, there are some pockets, we have some audio cassettes. We certainly have some video cassettes and DVDs of old town meetings that are probably, nearing their life expectancy. And that's something that when we did the preservation assessment, we flagged as, we've got to figure out what we're doing with these for the long term. But in general, I would say, almost all of our paper records are stored appropriately. We have great supplies. We have a great environment in the vault. And then in terms of the other records, whether it's video cassettes or other things, we're constantly looking at those and figuring out what's their lifespan and what technology improvements can we make. Getting the oral histories digitized, which you guys helped with last year, is awesome. That was a big chunk of outdated tech, as you say. And I would say that was probably one of the biggest, most valuable ones. We have a couple other small collections, like I said, town meetings and select board meetings on audio cassettes that at some point we may want to revisit, but those are things that I think are of less value and importance, at least at this point.
Thank you so much. Are there other questions from the committee before we turn to Beth? Beth, hello. Both a participant and eventually an applicant. Go ahead.
I just want to say I'm all for what Nate's doing. The Stickney maps, I don't know if he showed you or not, but when I was researching George Washington Dugan, I actually went into a black hole and did the whole Dugan family. And one of the maps shows the parcel of land that Thomas Dugan owned. So you can see the 10 acres that's on the road. So it's pretty cool. So you should all support it.
Yeah. Oh,
thanks, Beth.
Beth, you can always write a formal letter.
I thought that. I'm so excited. Yeah.
To the committee so that your voice is on record, not just on this digital form, but paper. That would be wonderful. Nate, I have one other question, and we talked about this a little bit on Saturday. Where are all the voting records kept?
Voting records are kept in the vault at the townhouse on the basement level. Active, as we're heading to November, those records would be kept in the upstairs vault. In Kari, who's the town clerk, maintains control over all of those. And then, once an election is completed, Kari submits her certification. We move them to the basement vault for their 2-year retention period.
Okay, so that I just wanted to review that process for the public, so that we could understand. So Kari Maitari has her own vault system for votes.
Yep, we have 2 vaults at the townhouse, the upstairs and the downstairs. The town clerk and myself control both vaults, and we share some space with the Treasury Department, but that is where all the election related material is kept.
Thank you so much. Are
Absolutely.
there other questions from anybody on the call? Well, thank you, Nate, so much. Your work is invaluable. And we're asking some of these questions because we want to understand whether you're going to be coming back to ask for more. So,
well, if it goes well, I certainly will.
I mean, we need, we also like to think about, what the long-term expectations of any project are. So thank you so very much. And thank
Absolutely.
you.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming this evening. The next project is the Concord Historical Commission, and I think Melissa Sawfield is going to be doing the presenting. Hi, Melissa. Good evening.
Hi, thank you. And I'm thrilled to be following Nate because I'll get to it later, but what he's requesting is something that will be a part of what I am requesting. And mine will actually be a phase 2. So yes, I will be coming back. But for tonight, I am just here to present on behalf of the Historical Commission and the Concord Planning Department. We are seeking a grant of $50,000 to create an historic preservation plan for the town. These funds would be used to hire a team of historic preservation consultants. It's been well over 20 years since Concord operated from a comprehensive preservation plan. And that plan, I have one document, but there are others, is dated. In fact, you can't even get this anymore. You can get it at the library and online. but it doesn't address the challenges of the 21st century. The town history included in this is incomplete. It ignores the role of African Americans and minimally describes the lives and contributions of Native tribes. And as we enter the 21st century, Concord faces some very different challenges than it did 20 years ago. Sustainability in view of climate change and weather impacts, the need for more affordable housing, maintaining economic well-being in view of globalization and major market changes. So these were not considered when that plan was developed 2 decades ago. Still, the master plan and related documents, including the survey of historical and architectural resources, have served to be an extremely valuable tool for the town. Collectively, these documents have guided town departments, community organizations alike to Concord's rich collection of historic properties and resources. And in fact, they are an integral part for you guys, the Community Preservations Committee. It forms a requirement for those people who are seeking under the category of historic preservation. They have to reference these documents. So if we are successful in receiving grant funds from you folks, we will create an integrated, multidisciplinary and community-wide plan that would support the goals that are articulated in the most recent long-range plan, Envision Concord Bridge to 2030. That plan emphasized the need for 1, better collaboration among town organizations, businesses, and historical groups. 2, more education and awareness among residents and businesses, town residents. 3, additional survey and research to identify historic resources that were not listed, among them like landscapes, monuments, stone walls, etc. And finally, a comprehensive review, and this is something we have started to do, which is the effectiveness of regulatory tools to better protect and preserve the town's historic character. So to create the new plan, our consultants will follow standards that were established by the Mass Historical Commission. And this includes a matching grant program to encourage preservation planning throughout the Commonwealth. For us to adhere to the MHC's requirements, we hope to qualify for a matching grant of $25,000, in which case we would reimburse the town $25,000. We will customize, of course, our plan in recognition of Concord's own unique goals and challenges. So the new plan, not unlike what we've just done in the past, but a little bit more expand, will identify the building sites, structures of local, state, and national importance. We will rank these resources. We will recommend tools and resources to aid preservation. We will develop a prioritized plan to support decision-making to further preservation efforts. And finally, we will help spread awareness to visitors and community members of the value and benefits of historic preservation. So as implied earlier in my comments, we have consulted with the MHC to ensure that our process meets exacting standards. Bid documents will adopt the MHC scope of work, customized for Concord, and define a fixed price, allowing the Historical Commission to select the best qualified bidder. Our proposal outlines our methodology, which I won't go into, but except to say that community outreach will be critically important. We will seek direct input from local boards, commissions, staff, organizations, business, and town residents. And to supplement this, we intend to host a couple of public forums to gather recommendations and feedback. So this represents the first phase in developing our online, in developing what ultimately would be an online historic preservation plan and reference guide. And this is sort of where Nate comes in. This online presence will include links to additional documentary resources that exist currently, and also what our consultants will be gathering. This would include links to the Library of Congress, town archives, Nate's work, the Macris records at the state level, special collections, photos, and more will be accessible via this online portal to historic resources. Very importantly, as new information and new documents come on board, we will be able to update that. We intend that this portal will become the go-to resource for professional historians, town planners, and individual homeowners. But that's phase 2. So phase 1 is we really need, and I've been trying to figure out how to update this document for like 4 years. Nancy knows this from the Historical Commission. Yeah. And I have been talking with Marcia Rasmussen, who said, really what we need, the town doesn't have a plan for preservation. Let's do that first. And then as a result of that, we would update all this, and then we would have this online portal, which would provide everybody, like Diane, you just asked the question, where would I go to get something like this? You would be able to go into this portal and click, 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 and then have all this available to you. I've met with Nate and Anka on a number of occasions. They understand this much better than I do. I am a Luddite when it comes to technology. They're not, but this is all very doable. It does obviously requires money and talent, but I know that we, if successful, and if you guys approve, we will get there. So that's what I'm asking.
And I just would like to say that the writing, the prose that was presented in this application.
Okay, I have to say that is all Ann Clifford, who Ann, I wish you would let yourself be seen, because I just can't tell you how important she's been to getting this done.
It's quite gorgeous. Concord is
Beautiful.
reflection and inspiration and endurance.
There you go.
Our nation, very, very powerful sense of place. I mean, it's gorgeous. It's beautifully written.
It is.
And it really, in so many ways, embraces the sentiments of our town. I mean, it was just gorgeous. So I want to thank you for that, and Anne and Melissa for.
Well, thank Anne.
For Anne, thank you. It's just gorgeous. The two people focusing on this are Burton and Eve. So we'll start by seeing what questions they have.
Make them easy, please.
Would you like to start?
I could start, or
Okay.
go ahead, Burton.
No, please, Eve, you go first. Thanks.
Okay. I don't know if I can say this, but I really love this whole thing. I just have two technical questions because of my own ignorance. I'm wondering, first of all, if how far forward in history the town's plan will it include the post-war era of housing here, mid-century modern houses?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that is one of the biggest gaps we have, it was a couple of years ago, we altered our demolition delay bylaw. So it used to be 75 years back. Now it's a rolling 50 years. So every year we've got some more historic properties, and those like particularly Canantum, nothing was really done on Canantum. There's a whole lot of work that hasn't been done. I don't want to minimize, denigrate, or anyway. Ann Forbes, who oversaw the project 20 some years ago, did an awesome job. It's amazing what she's done, but there's so much more to do, and there's more because of technology, frankly, there's more ways to do it. So yes, it would bring it right up to date. I don't know, included in the proposal, for example, was Lennox. So the outfit that we would like to hire, I don't know how explicit I can be. So the outfit that we would like to hire has done a lot of this preservation plans for a lot of communities across the Commonwealth. MHC is very high in this outfit. They're from Pennsylvania, and it is very comprehensive. And they are who we hope to be able to hire for this.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And I just have one quick follow-up question. And that is coming from my ancient background as a planner. How much do you think the end products that you'll be producing will be affecting the architectural design guidelines that people who are coming to the Historic Commission for requests to make changes to their houses? Is there a connection there?
I don't think, Anne, I might ask your help on this. I don't think so. That you're thinking of the HDC.
I am.
And we are the Historical Commission. It's different.
True.
They have authority over design. It's something that we could put in the RFP. I don't really know.
It sounds like there's no plan for that connection to be made.
No.
Wouldn't it happen just in the description, the improved description of properties that would suggest certain things? It could, I suppose, certain things that would be more appropriate than others. Help me, Eve.
Well,
colors, massing, all that goes into the architectural style that HDC looks at. And if they had something to reference what the documented historical style was of the building in question, that might be very useful to them.
Well,
I'm-
one of the things, I just gonna say, one of the, part of this plan requires public input. So that's part of the idea, that having a couple of public forums and community-wide, they would be interviewing the HDC, they would be interviewing community groups. That's what I realized what Marcia, why she was so keen on, pushing me in this direction. We don't have that. We have never really had a town-wide conversation about planning and historic planning and what the value of it is. So I think you bring up a good point, and I think, yes, it would be addressed.
I love that. Thank you.
And Melissa, this is something you've been wanting to do for quite a while, and that you found,
Yes.
you
Yes.
found a way to give it articulation is really very encouraging. Thank you, Eve. Burton?
Thank you. I guess mine's less of a question than a comment. I was looking through, and the thing that jumped out, my thought was, okay, so who will use this planning document? Who will be guided by this? And I think, you've got the Historic Commission, Historic District Commission, Select Board, Planning Board, and CPC listed. And Melissa, you and I have seen a couple of very sort of quick historic preservation sort of planning efforts that what I'm thinking of is the roads effort, and then the effort that happened in the historic district there off of Sudbury Road, where that was extended. And that seemed a little bit like a ad hoc effort that was responding to current conditions. And I think being able to have a plan like this that is guiding people, and that you can look back to and say, somebody says, well, why are you doing this? You say, because it was identified by the plan. But two comments, one of which is, I think in anything like that that's going to be relied on by the select board, the historic, these boards that make real changes in our town, it's really important to get public input on the plan. As it's developed. Otherwise, it will be criticized as being advancing a particular interest, unless you're as part of your planning process, you have public forums that are advertised. I also really love the idea that you said about the making sort of a living digital document here, because getting access to this stuff, I think, would be really enlightening for a lot of people. I know, having spent some time poking around in the archives and realizing I was really the only customer down there, that there's some tremendous resources, and if that could be tied into something that's I could imagine you talking about, let's just, because I had my head in this, the historic elements of the Thoreau Depot area. I mean, there's all those amazing letters and pictures that are in the archives from the turn of the last century onwards that are there. And if those could be connected to a document like this, that would be a great resource. So that's my soapbox piece. There's not a question in there, in case you were.
No, that's exactly what we want. And we I don't know how you design a website to accommodate all this, but Nate kind of understands it, and Anka does, and that would be phase 2, because we absolutely agree with you. There is so much available to people right now, and nobody quite knows. Well, Anka maybe knows how to get to it, Nate knows how to get to it, but most of us really don't, and it shouldn't be so difficult. We really do want people to have easy access to this and have it organized. So, again, I'm going to come back next year, I think. I don't know where I'll be, but somebody's going to come back next year, and hoping that we can do this phase 2 and develop the web portion of this. But first of all, we got to get a plan underway, or maybe it's 2 years from now.
And maybe just to tighten it into a question, I imagine a historical document like this is based upon a lot of research, but will there be the opportunity for public input in terms of where the priorities should be? Where things are maybe have not been looked at as closely before?
Yes, that's that. If you gotta go through, it's pretty lengthy, the methodology, but this outfit that we will hope to hire, that's part of their job. We want them to get feedback from the community, so specific organizations, specific groups, but also public forum after they've developed. This is, Anne, you can maybe help me. This is my understanding, and I've read through what we intend to do and what they have done for Lenox and Beverly and a couple other towns. The public engagement was a very important part of the whole project. It won't succeed if the public doesn't understand it. I appreciate what happened at last town meeting, for the Thoreau district and how hard that was. And I think people fear change. They don't necessarily understand it. And so the hope for this is we will be developing a whole database, a whole series of amount of information for people to understand why decisions could possibly be made.
Okay, great.
Thank you so much. John, and then Paul, and then Nancy, and then I have a question. John?
Melissa, I think you answered my question. The 50,000 is for the plan, not for the platform.
Exactly. It's two parts. So we're only asking to be able to hire this outfit to develop the plan.
Good. And when you use the word consultants, you really mean, at least you're optimistic that it would be this particular group.
Oh, yes, we're very optimistic.
Or equally qualified.
Yeah, I won't say beyond that, but yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Paul?
You're muted.
Paul, you're muted. I know.
Another violation. I want to echo the sentiment for, I think this application is, it's not only a lovely application, it's complete, very rigorous.
Yes.
We know what you're doing. It's very well thought out. Let me just start from, I have a few questions. Let me start from the end. You have a sample table of contents. Do you envision that the document will resemble that, or is that going to be up to the consultant? Just the structure of the document.
Well, Anne, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is basically from what previous things they have produced. So,
Okay.
So yes. I mean, it could be altered, but that's a part of, we would be working with them, but this is a sample taken from their own efforts.
Okay. And how confident are you in the budget estimate? Is this something that has some precedence?
Pretty confident, working with Marcia, who this is her world, Marcia Rasmussen, our head of planning, land management.
And she
Okay.
seems to feel that 50,000 is an adequate amount.
That was my
No.
question, right?
Yeah.
And last question, at the end, so in the recommendation section, phase C, it refers to a 5-year action plan. What are you thinking in that 5-year action? So that's a plan within a plan. You want a 5-year action plan that's embedded in this plan. What do you envision would be the components, the types of things in that 5-year plan?
Well, it's going to take a couple of years to actually even produce this, gather the information, the implementation is really up to the town and the various town departments that will be affected by this. So that, it's a best guess estimate of how we would implement this. I'm a little concerned because Marcia won't be here. We will have a new chief of planning and land management, and Marcia's the person that I've sort of relied on to help my thinking. And I know that Anne has worked with her. Obviously, she's Anne's boss. So that's the best I can say. I think it's going to require like people from the Historical Commission and others, planning department, planning committee, planning board, to make sure that the town sort of stays on task on implementing this. Because, you've lived here, I don't know how long you've lived here. I've lived here a long time, and we've had various long range plans that were brilliantly conceived and written, and then nothing ever came of them. So I know if you don't stay on task, things don't happen.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
That's terrific. Nancy? Thank you, Paul. Nancy?
I just wanted to emphasize something that Melissa was addressing earlier in terms of public engagement. And the Historical Commission actually has folks on board who are working hard to involve owners of historic properties. And I think that's going to be a really, really, really important group to get on board and with a program, and to be a resource for them. And so I think that's really great. The other thing was, I just want to clarify on page 3, under the proposed community-wide historic preservation plan, Number one, sites include landscapes.
Yeah.
Okay, so not exactly the same in my mind, but landscapes, historic landscapes are a really important part.
Well,
So
which is
that's all.
something,
That's all.
you know, I was just gonna say that historic landscapes were not addressed in
I
this
know.
20-some years ago.
Yeah, sites sometimes means just a little house on a piece of land as opposed to broad swaths of landscape. That's all. Thank you. That was great.
Thank you, Melissa. I have one question, and it's an abstract question. So I'm not sure it can be, really easily addressed. I've recently become aware that we have 40 different languages spoken in Concord.
Great.
Which is kind of interesting. 40 different languages. I would not have realized that. I mean, if you just asked me, I don't know what I would have guessed, but I would not have thought there were 40 distinct and different languages spoken in the homes in Concord. Does this intend in any way to take into account the way in which we have become a diverse, because you used that word to some degree when you were talking about the plan, the diverse nature of our community?
Well, I think it's implied because I mean, when you just think about the history, we recognize that the history that this includes is, you read it now, it's God, it's so limited. It doesn't acknowledge much of what Concord is today. Today, Concord is much more diverse. So yes, the other thing is, we haven't engaged anybody because we haven't got a plan. We haven't got the money, and so when we would write up a more specific RFP, that's something that to be included. But my personal sense is that it's about the Concord of today, evaluating our historic resources and getting a feedback from the community. Maybe not everyone wants, I don't want the town preserved in aspic, but I do want the town's historic value and place in our country to be acknowledged and protected in some way.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, I think it would.
Yeah, and that could there could be interesting tensions that grow out of that discourse, and that will be a welcome conversation in our community. That's fantastic, because you mentioned affordable housing and you mentioned a variety of things that right now are percolating in our town, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, again, the idea is to bring this up to date.
Yeah. Melissa, this was terrific. Thank you so much. Are there any questions from anyone in the community who is observing? Any questions? Thank you, Melissa, so much. And thank you for your leadership of that committee. And don't tell us you're not coming back next year to present phase 2.
Well, actually be 2 years. I think this thing takes a couple of years. Okay, well,
that's we want you around as long as you're willing to do this. Okay.
Thank you.
And now we have Rydell. Hi, Rod, father of Tim, wonderful friend. Rod is working with the Concord Public Works to work on the cemeteries and stone walls of our in our cemeteries, and he gave us a wonderful view of the condition of many of those stone walls. And on our visit on Saturday, Rod. So thank you. It was really helpful. But if you would now present to the committee and to the community what it is that you hope to do.
Well, thank you, Diane, and many thanks to the committee. And Anne, if I could ask that you put up the slide deck that I provided. And while you're doing that, I just want to mention that Tish Hopkins, Cemetery Superintendent, is also on the line, and she'll be certainly happy to answer any detailed questions that you may have. So this concerns our funding requests on behalf of Concord Cemeteries for restoration of stone walls and structures. May I have the next slide, please? Before we begin with the presentation, we have to start by thanking the committee, first of all, for your time and effort to review this funding request. It's very apparent from your visit and from the discussions that we've just witnessed that you take this job very seriously. And as a citizen, I'm deeply grateful that you do that. And as an applicant, we really want to be respectful of your efforts. So we will be factual and we will be brief tonight. I also want to thank you for CPC's previous support to the cemetery starting in fiscal year 2012 with the grant for granite posts and chain fence in Sleepy Hollow Cemetery, and then a very large two-part grant that occurred in 2017 and 18 for improving significantly cemetery roadway infrastructure and drainage in the Sleepy Hollow Cemetery. That was $525,000, and it had an enormous impact on those sections where the construction was performed. You have the next slide, please. Today, the project goal of our application is to restore 35 deteriorating stone walls and structures in all three of Concord's historic cemeteries. And that's 2 in the center of town, the Old Hill Burying Ground and South Burying Ground, and then Sleepy Hollow Cemetery. Next slide, please. The historical significance of these stone walls is substantial. And we wrote in our application about the historical significance, but we could not write it as succinctly and as eloquently as Melissa Southfield did as chairperson of the Concord Historical Commission in a letter of support for our application that she prepared. Now, for you members of the committee, that letter actually came in several hours after we had submitted our application to Anne for your review back in September 16th, but it will be part of our updated submission in November. And you can read Melissa's text just as well as I can, and so I will not take your time and narrate it for you. Next slide, please. This history of the request dates back to 2018, where the cemetery master plan was updated and released. And in that plan was included the goal of restoration of stone walls. Well, from 2018 to 2022, Concord Public Works conducted urgent repairs on several stone walls and structures, and then was able to find the funds and find a source so that in 2021 and ending in 2022, to conduct and complete a comprehensive inventory and evaluation of all the stone walls and all the stone structures in the cemeteries. Next slide, please. That field evaluation started in November of 2021, and it was conducted by an engineering company known as Wright Pierce. And Wright Pierce went around with the engineering department of Concord Public Works and performed a visual inspection of all of the stone walls and stone structures in the 3 cemeteries. And they graded those stone walls and stone structures and found 54 that were in good condition and required no repair, 38 that were fair and required some repointing and minor repair, and then 24 that were in poor condition and required partial or full reconstruction. And that assessment report is in the application. Yes.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but in the background someplace there's some lovely music, and if somebody, wherever that's going on, if somebody could please mute themselves, it would be terrific. Thanks so much. Keep going, Rod. I apologize.
No problem. May we go to the next slide, please? So in this application, we have proposed to restore structures in all 3 cemeteries. South Burying Ground, there were a total of 2 requiring repair, and they're both in fair condition. They only require repointing. In the Old Hill Burying Ground, there's a total of 13 walls and structures that require some level of repair. And you can see here that 9 are in the fair condition and 4 are in poor condition that require a reconstruction. And then in Sleepy Hollow Cemetery, we are not requesting any restoration for any of the structures that are considered fair condition, but we are requesting funding for reconstruction of all of the walls and structures that are considered poor. there still remain 27 walls and structures in Sleepy Hollow Cemetery that were graded fair, but they are not included in this application. They may be the subject of a future application, or we may look for alternative funding sources to effect those repairs and restorations. May I have the next slide, please? So again, just to remind you, in South Burying Ground, that's just beyond Middlesex Bank on Main Street, there will be 2 stone walls that require restoration. On Old Hill Burying Ground, there are 8 stone walls that require some level of restoration and repair, and 5 stone structures. Next slide, please. And then in Sleepy Hollow Cemetery, there are 2 stone structures that require a reconstruction. What you're looking at on the left-hand part of the slide is the stairway that leads to Daniel Chester French's grave, which does require some extensive repair and reconstruction. And there are 18 walls that require reconstruction of some sort. And the one that you're looking at on the right, this is just the retaining wall that is goes along Bedford Street on Route 62, in which there are, it's at a point where all the stones are falling out of the wall. Next slide, please. So our funding request from the committee and from the fund is for $340,000. The total budget is $685,800. Other funds are going to be supplied by the cemetery fund and several other sources. Next slide, please. That ends the formal presentation. And if you have any questions or wish to discuss any of these items, please proceed.
Thank you, Rod, so much. The 2 people on the committee who are focusing on this particular are Sarah Grimwood and Paul Bohm. So they will begin our questions. Sarah, your hand's already up.
So thank you, Rod. So there was a number of, I think it was in the Sleepy Hollow Cemetery, there was a number of walls that were marked as fair that you chose not to put into the application. Can you just tell us why you how you selected or didn't select those compared to others that you did select that were fair in the other cemeteries?
The rationale for the selection of structures went as follows. Since we were going to make interventions in the center of town, we wanted to do it once. So anything that required an intervention or a restoration, we wanted to do it once and get it all done at once. Mm-hmm. And then looking at the total budget size, we didn't think that we could afford to raise matching funds for the entire work in Sleepy Hollow. And so we focused instead on those structures and walls that require the most urgent. There's a side benefit to all of this as well. And I believe the previous presentation by Melissa Salfield brought it up. There's the planning and there's the concept and the strategy, but then there's the implementation. And this is a big job. And so we really want to make sure we're learning as we go along. And we didn't want to just get overwhelmed by trying to do everything all at once. I suspect we're going to learn quite a bit as we go through this. And as we learn, we'll be able to potentially do more efficient restorations going forward. And then finally, in Sleepy Hollow Cemetery, we just picked the structures and walls that were most urgent in their need. And the others that are fair, well, we hope to get to them before they become really in poor condition. But that's the general rationale.
May I ask another question, Paul?
Of course. What a good set of questions. Keep going, Sarah.
So do you have a sense, once the repairs are done, how long they should last before needing any more work? And I'm kind of wondering whether in the long run, I don't know anything about stone walls. So is it more efficient to do kind of preventative maintenance along the way, or you just do nothing until they desperately need work?
I will speak from my own perspective about this, having some stone walls on my own property that, and I'm a big proponent of getting something to a condition where you feel that it's proper, and then performing preventative maintenance from that point onward.
Right, okay.
And in terms of predicting whether a stone wall that has been restored will not need any repointing or any preventative maintenance for 5 years, I would not want to be the person held accountable for that prediction.
Okay, I was just interested.
Yeah, no, I think what we will find is that there are walls that with sections, again, that look quite good now that are not repaired. And then water seeps in, and 2 years
Yeah.
later, there's a crack. I think the key here is to get ahead of the maintenance requirements, and that it's so much more effective and so much less expensive if one can get into a circumstance where you have a preventative maintenance budget, and every year you're going around and heading these problems off by performing minor repairs. And that's where I hope we'll be in 4 or 5 years with these stone structures and stone walls in the cemetery.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Paul.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not muted. It's a miracle.
Flowers will be arriving in the morning.
Rod, thank you very much for the application. I want to reiterate what I said before. This application was very thorough, well written, very clear, well budgeted. In my 2 years on the committee, we've seen all manner of applications. This is very solid. There's a lot of effort goes into doing this level, so I want to thank you for that. I have just a few clarifying questions as I go through the application. In the project background, you talked about the 2018 repairs on urgently needed walls. Are those walls that are sort of worse than poor? Were those is there another condition that is worse than poor?
Well, these were, go ahead, Tish, please.
2018, the focus really was roadway maintenance and drainage. Along one of the roadways was a stone wall that was in poor condition, and it became part of the project just because of where it was.
I see. So
just because it was along that one-way road that led to Author's Ridge, and the entire road was being redone. So it made sense to do that wall as part of that project.
Thank you. So I assume all those repairs and everything's in good condition. None of those need additional work at this point?
Those are evaluated as in good condition. And I hope that they stay that way for the next 2 years and they don't creep into the fair condition. But,
yeah.
But Paul, I want to add one point to what Tish had said. In my role as committee member, I walked through the cemetery on an almost weekly basis with another committee member, Leo Carroll, who was enormously educational experience walking with him. And he would find walls where stones had fallen out, and we're on the roadway, and physically pick them up and place them back, and then tell Tish and her colleagues. So that's how some of the urgent repairs were mentioned. And in terms of your compliment, Paul, first of all, thank you, but a lot of credit needs to go to Aaron and especially Tish and Justine in the office, because I'm just facilitating the information they've gathered and kept. Yeah.
Well, thank you to all. Second question, a bit of a follow-up and maybe redundant on what Sarah was asking. On the walls in fair condition that aren't part of this application, may we assume that those will be part of a subsequent application to take care of those at Sleepy Hollow?
The honest answer is we don't know. They could be, but we are very interested in looking at alternative sources of funding for future projects, because we intend to do something similar for all of the metal structures in the cemeteries, the 3 cemeteries, and then subsequently start to work on trees and on the landscape restoration as well. So we don't want to keep going to the well. here with the Community Preservation Committee, but rather would like to use this as an example. The ideal from my perspective, I don't know if we can achieve this or not, but the ideal from my perspective is to use, if you are so inclined, and we do receive funding, to use that as a fact, as evidence of the town's commitment, and use it as a lever to try and get state or national source funding for subsequent projects in the like in the cemetery.
Okay, no, thank you. Couple of more things. So the budget is the budget estimates per wall. It's really impressive what you have here. But where did those estimates come from? Was that the group that evaluated the condition, and that come from vendors or?
No, that's right. That's one. It's single source, and there's some uncertainty associated with it. It was Wright Pierce. And that's why the budget, which is in table 4 of the application, is on page 7. It has a contingency fee of 20% overage. Again, I think one of the biggest problems, and one of the things that I found when people have come to repair stone walls in my property, is they take off the top row of stones, which you hope is the end of the problem, and then they find out that there's more. So there is some uncertainty there.
Just a couple more. In the sustainability section, you refer to sustainable stormwater management practices. Will these repairs involve a lot of stormwater rerouting or stormwater repairs? Can you clarify what the concerns or the? I know why that's in here, just sort of as a placeholder, but is there any reality to stormwater problems related to these repairs?
Well, I'll take a stab at it. Tish, if you want to chime in, please do. Well, one of the biggest issues with all of these stone walls is the deterioration of the drainage, particularly in retaining stone walls. And things tend to back up, and then you start getting erosion because water drains. Many of these retaining walls are on a slope, and so which runs in a sort of perpendicular to the height of the stone wall. So it runs to the side, runs along the bottom of the stone wall. And if you don't have adequate, appropriate drainage for stormwater, you start eroding the soil and the stones down at the bottom, and that can really significantly compromise the repairs that you've made. I didn't know of a succinct way to explain all that. I'm glad you brought up the question.
No, that's terrific. And so there's a bit of an unknown there. So maybe that's built into your contingency if you have to address, those kind of issues.
There are those, and there are permitting issues, and then there is going to be concerns with abutters. In some of the Old Hill burying ground, we are going to be repairing walls where there's residents that abut the area where the stone wall is going to be repaired. So we want to make sure we do that right, and whatever needs to be done in terms of permitting and adequate, preparation is performed.
Okay, and last question on the outreach, and maybe this is Nancy's area more, in the excavation and permits from the Massachusetts Historical Commission. Are those any of those anticipated, or do those come up as you repair? Tell me more about what you think about the excavations.
Are you asking me, Paul, or you're asking Nancy?
No, I'm answering.
Yeah,
I'm asking you.
I can add.
Well, everybody can add.
I defer to you, Nancy. You're the expert.
No. Go ahead, and then I'll chime in. It might not be the same exactly.
Well, the question was really in the repairs. Are there areas that you think you will have to excavate?
We at this time, we honestly don't know yet. We don't know. The hope is that we will not be required to excavate, but we don't know, and that's another reason why there's a contingency in the budget.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
So
you.
I could wait until after the primary people have spoken.
Well, Nancy, why don't you go ahead if you're going to be addressing stone walls?
Well, I had a couple of thoughts. In the application, there's reference to national register status, national and state. And also on page 8, right where we are, there is a statement that some of these walls are either National Historic Landmarks or would qualify as National Historic Landmarks. So an observation and recommendation that I would have is, I don't know the engineering firm, but I know engineers sometimes look at restoration projects differently than historic preservation professionals. And if you're going to comply with secretary standards, which most people think they know what they are, but really they haven't taken the deep dive, you might want to be in touch with a historic preservation professional who understands stone walls. I wondered if the engineering firm had ever dealt with historic stone walls. So it's more a question of folding in the historic preservationist, because if these walls, and I can imagine some of them are National Historic Landmark eligible or maybe designated, I don't know. But that seems to me a perspective that might be missing, but would be really important.
Nancy, that's a great catch. And I can think of some stone structures in the New Hill Burying Ground section of Sleepy Hollow where they may fall right into that category. So thank you for that suggestion, and we'll incorporate it into our plan.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I thought, I agree with what other people have said. This is an incredibly detailed application with a lot of research and thought that has gone into looking at the issues. And it's very easy to understand what you want to do now and imagine what might come next. So
It's very exciting.
yeah, it really is great to see something with this degree of professionalism and care.
John, thank you, Nancy. Nancy, did you have another comment?
No, I'll take down my hand. Wait a minute. No, that's
Okay.
it.
Thank you. John.
Yeah, my question was about the 345,000 in the cemetery fund. Is that already in the fund, or will that have to be voted at the same town meeting where our grants will be voted?
Question.
But John, we have available funds, and the question is whether we'll take most of that 345,000 out of the cemetery fund, or a portion from the cemetery fund and a portion from some other funds that we're working on. So alternative sources of funding are also being pursued.
So you're not counting on a town meeting, town budget number?
I believe, well, John, it sounds like you know more about that detail than I.
No, well, Tish may know. Tish may know.
Yeah.
Aaron would know for sure, but I don't think I don't think that there's going to be a request for any extra money at town meeting. I think it's money that's in our fund already.
It's already
We
in
can
the
for
fund.
tomorrow, but there's been no discussion of us going to town meeting for anything.
No, that's right, Tish. There's been no discussion about town meeting requesting any funds, like a debt limit or anything like that. Yeah, nothing.
Thank you. And then the Friends of Sleepy Hollow, I see they have a very complimentary letter, but do you expect them to financially participate?
John, that's a great question. And you had asked that during the site visit, and I did not give you the answer that you deserved at that time. I was about to do it and then I got distracted, so my apologies. The Friends of Sleepy Hollow Cemetery generally work with funds that are in the tens of thousands as opposed to the hundreds of thousands in terms of their support. And they have been, what I meant to show you was while we were standing there in front of the Melvin Memorial, the new bollards, which are those black poles that are in front of the memorial, they were responsible for getting the permanent bollards that were in place. And that was one of their most recent gifts to the Sleepy Hollow Cemetery. They're also planning to do some things at the gate of the knoll section, the newer section of Sleepy Hollow Cemetery. But those gifts are more in the $10, $20, $30,000 range, not the $50 to $100 to $150,000 range. So we have not yet approached them for a gift in this manner because they've been unbelievably generous this year already. So I'm afraid that don't want to scare them away with asking for a six-figure donation.
No, thank you.
Are there questions from other questions? My power was just dying, so I had to quickly move something. Are there other questions from the committee? I have one if there aren't others. Rod, one of the wonderful things that we noted and discussed a little bit on our site visit was the wonderful mosses and the quality of the rocks that sustain the sensibility of the antiquity of the spaces. And the hope that maybe we could, in fact, that in the restoration, we would not lose that sense of antiquity. Now the mosses are not going to eat away those rocks quickly. We have a lot of stone walls on our properties in New Hampshire, and the mosses are not the problem.
No, they're not.
It's
No.
deer leaping over the walls, which become more of a problem. But do you know whether in working with this engineering firm or in working with whomever ultimately does this project, whether they will be as sensitive to that particular aesthetic?
Yes, and Diane, this is a question that came up during the site visit. This and Nancy's recommendation about involving historic preservation engineering firms that we will add to the project. Your suggestion as well as Nancy's, because mosses and lichens are a sign of health, on stone, and we're going to have to explore that. I do not have a specific answer, nor can I give you assurance that we're going to be able to do it. I do want to point out that the entity that came and did the assessment, they are an engineering firm. So there was just like, a rock is a rock, so they were more focused on like, what is it going to take to make this thing structurally, perpendicular, not fall into another structure or fall into Bedford Street, that sort of thing. Right. Where you are quite appropriately talking about another level of expertise and of care that goes on top of that. And we haven't done the homework yet. And so we're going to have to do that.
Okay, thank you. So it is rocket science after all. Never mind.
Well, it's rock science at least.
I just couldn't resist. Okay, Rod, thank you so much. This is an exciting undertaking. Yeah, the committee will look forward to deliberating. And with any other questions, Rod, when you begin to figure the kind of responses to those, if you could get back to us, it would be terrific.
Certainly, we'll do that. We'll give you an update when we submit, all the other letters of support. In that November, we'll give you an update. Okay.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, Beth Van Duzer, who's been very patient and waited here. And Beth, your tour of the Civil War Monument was terrific.
Oh, good.
And as you know, you also had the wonderful historian with you, a man of great respect here in Concord as well, to help us observe this monument and its history. So if you would take us, I want to say something about this particular application before we begin. If anybody observing this, most of us who are on this call have already observed it. But if you're watching this and you're just curious what the CPC is doing, I would urge you to go and read this application in particular, because it is replete with any number of letters from fifth graders And let me just share one with you from Wesley, who is 14 years old. You may think the Civil War Monument in Concord Center is cool, but do you know it's missing a name? George Washington Dugan was born, and then on it goes. And the number of letters from these kids is just fantastic. And it's a testament, not just to the undertaking that you all, on which you all are working, but it's also a testament to the way in which you've pulled the community into this whole project. And great respect for having done that and for including them in this project. So that's it.
All right. So we have a civil war. We have men march off on April 19th, 1861. They are later referred to as the Minutemen of 61 because April 19th, 1775 is when our men here in Concord, the Minutemen, go and they fight at North Bridge. In 1863, we have George Washington Dugan enlist in February. He's mustered in at March, which means he had a month to get everything ready. In my opinion, he probably came to Concord and told people he was going. And then he is never seen again after the assault on Fort Wagner, which is July 18th, 1863. And he is not given a date of death. He is marked as missing. If you have not read Drew Gilpin Faust's book about death in the Civil War, everyone should read it. It's fabulous. But yeah, it's crazy to think that the Civil War changes everything. We didn't have unknown soldiers really like we did starting with the Civil War. People didn't realize people were being piled into ditches and then just like buried, and people were stealing things from them and all. So it was something people couldn't imagine. And we don't have CNN back then. We don't have Twitter. Nobody knows what's the truth. So the fact that he's marked as missing is fine, but the fact that he's never given a date of death until 1932 is kind of sad, because I think if one of the three committees that met before us knew he was dead, they would have put him on the monument. So the first committee puts on 32 names. The next committee puts on more names. The final committee adds some more names. We're up to 48. They don't put everybody on. We went through the list of the names that they went through and rejected to make sure they should still be rejected. And they were never either had a birthplace, home, or grave here. And really, this is to right a historical wrong that was not intentional, in my opinion.
So can you go on and explain, because it's not just that. I mean, it's the monument itself.
Oh, the monument itself. Yeah, we can talk about the monument itself. Yeah. So the monument itself, actually, it's really cool. It is designed by Hammett Billings, who, if you're an architecture nerd or a literature nerd, he did the drawings for Little Women Part 2. He did the drawings for Harriet Beecher Stowe's, the first version of Uncle Tom's Cabin. And he actually designed some other Civil War monuments in the area. He was kind of a big deal at the time. But there's a drawing in special collections, and Ankh is not here anymore, but I have it. And it made me feel good about my art because it's actually kind of leaning to the side. It's not drawn straight. But he drew out what the monument would look like. The town employs 2 men from New Hampshire to create this monument, but one of them was originally from Boston and married Daniel Chester French's sister. So we have a local connection to the people that built the monument. And the one was a Civil War veteran. It's made of granite from New Hampshire. The plaques were put on. The one is still the original plaque. The other one's been changed out twice, but you can see after 155 winters in New England, it's not looking its best, kind of like Morning Victory, the Melvin Memorial. You know, winters are not kind. She needed a facelift. We need a facelift on the monument. And now the time is right, I really feel, for this all to be done at once, because from here on out, it will just be maintenance on everything. Maintenance really for biologicals, and anything that can happen can be cleaned up quickly and will not cost a lot of money and time in the future.
So that, just for clarification, it's not just the adding of Dugan's name, but it's the spiffing up of the monument itself.
Yep, preservation and conservation.
Yes,
to be fancy. Yeah.
Yeah. Terrific. Now, the 2 people who are overseeing or kind of specializing in this particular project, Beth, are John Crossley and Nancy Nelson. So, John and Nancy, you want to start with your questions, please? Nancy, you know you're muted, just in case you think you're not. Nope, you're still muted. And can you unmute Nancy? Because I think you can do that.
I
Very-
was just saying I would let John go first,
Oh, okay.
not knowing that I couldn't unmute myself.
Yeah, I really have no questions about George Washington. Duggan, the case is made extremely well by all these young people and your committee and Rick Fries. I just was curious, who do you have in mind to do the repairs? Is it a bid type approach? Or is there someone who's really good at this?
Because this is a town project, we will be putting it out to bid. Right? So it's going to be, it might be over 100,000. So I think that makes it an RFP. RFP? It's an RFP. Okay, that's what we're going to do. Yeah.
Is that all you had, John?
Yeah, that was just my one question about the work. Who will do the work?
You're kind of asking something that relates to what I was wondering about, because I was curious, this relates to my earlier comment. Who are the preservation professionals that you're in touch with? And do you have any choice in doing an RFP or just a competitive bid? I mean, sometimes you can construct a contract that people bid on that say exactly what you want it to be and how you want things to be done. I'm afraid if you have an open RFP that says, please tell us what you think you should do, that you might miss an opportunity to really professionally define the work that needs to be done. So it's the question again of getting preservationists involved.
So for the plaque, we're definitely doing an RFP. So the that's the version we're going to do with, right? The RFP is the one where you can make it more specific for people under 100,000, right?
Okay.
So the plaque
with your constraints, except for public bid, I know it has.
So yeah, so we talked to Tish, his last name, Bucaccio, was that his last name? The guy who'd worked on the Shaw Monument?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Boccaccio, that's the guy that David found. Yes.
Yeah. So one person that has a foundry and he would make the plaque right where he is. He worked on the Shaw Monument down in Boston.
You have David Wood, I presume.
Yeah.
When
Oh
you
yeah, him.
Found,
Yeah.
that David found. Okay,
Yeah,
just-
he's on the committee. Yeah.
Oh,
okay,
okay.
and the-
Okay. Well,
and
that-
the Shaw Monument is the one that is across from the State House in Boston.
Correct.
It's just been recently redone, and if you haven't seen it, it's really quite stunning. But
Yeah.
okay.
So that's the same company that worked on the Shaw Memorial?
Bucaccio, something. Yeah, we got actually
Yeah.
got a quote from him. It was good for 4 weeks.
That's,
So-
well, you know, things change fast right now.
Yeah, exactly. So we were like, that's great. We won't ask you again until we have money. Because everything's just going to go up, the price. The other, I mean, Daedalus, who takes care of the Melvin Memorial, is the one company we talked to, and we had them write up very specific information for us because, yet once again, because it's more time, the question is it going to cost over $100,000 a year from now, or is it going to cost $75,000? They're going to have scaffolding in place. And when they get up there, I don't know what happens. Tish, feel free to jump in.
It's probably, I think it'll probably be the same type of thing that we did for the Melvin, and it was an RFP. We did request for proposal for the Melvin a few years ago. I don't know that the $100,000 limit doesn't let you do that. I think you can still do an RFP.
Okay.
And then the way the RFP is written, obviously, we would write very specific information about who's going to be bidding, what they've done in the past, criteria for their knowledge of the job.
Yeah, there is a good list towards the end of the application, actually, what you were going to be looking at and how you would evaluate.
Yeah, that would all be pretty specific in the RFP, so that only people who are really qualified, who meet the qualifications or over exceed the qualifications, would even be able to bid. And if somebody bid that didn't meet those qualifications, their bid could be thrown out.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
And do you have any preservationists consulting with you on your development of the RFP? That might be a good thing.
Josh Crane wrote the spec.
Who?
Josh Crane from Daedalus.
Oh, okay. And that's okay.
He wrote the spec that you I think is in the package. He wrote that spec.
Yeah,
That'll be
That's
incorporated into
what
the
I
RFP.
wondered. That was a Daedalus. That
Yep,
was.
that's from Daedalus.
Thank
Oh,
you.
okay. That was one of my questions. And I just remember there was controversy at one point in time about the Minuteman statue and the gold leaf that would have been put on the inscription. Beth looks knowledgeable of that. So that brings to mind maintenance. And will any protective covering be placed on the bronze pieces? Because the statue was, it was very controversial about incralac. Do you remember that? No. Anyway, the maintenance of the statue as well as, or the granite as well as the bronze stuff is something just to consider.
Well, I do know David Wood every year goes out to the USS Concord Bell and polishes it with Brasso. So I think we should just have him do that to the monument. Since he's not here, we could just like nominate him.
Maybe.
Or find some lovely person that really wants to do it. You have to do it when the leaves aren't on the trees. So you get like a nice warm
I don't know
day.
about Brasso, but
We'll find someone.
I would check that out and see. Incralac is something that was used on Michelangelo's David statue, I guess, and maybe used on the Minuteman statue. I'm not sure what the National Park now does, but you might want to just be knowledgeable about that going forward.
That's going to be an important part of the whole application process, is to know how this ongoing cost will then be protected. So if you could do some research on that and get back to us, it would be a big help. And Nancy, would you be willing to spell the word the infalac?
Well, it's been a while. INCRALAC. Anne, you know?
Infalac.
She didn't know. I can find out. Beth, I can be back in touch with you somehow.
Well, if it was good enough for Michelangelo's David, it's going to be enough for our little statue. Thank you. Are there other questions from members of the committee? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Beth. Thank you, Tish. We look forward to.
One last thing. I know the pins may be a real problem, and Tish told me so. But I would love to think about the bunting and the wreaths and whatnot that decorated the monument for special occasions in the past. And if there's a way to figure out how to do that, that would just be fun for the 250th. That's all. Okay, that's all I have.
The bunting is in a reference to some nails that are presently in the monument. If you go
right, but maybe there's another way.
Yeah, some of them are bleeding a little bit, as it were. John, did you have any questions on this one? John,
I had one earlier, but I am curious about the number. Are you quite comfortable at the 165,000?
No idea.
With all, yeah. I mean,
I can tell you that the cost just for having the plaque created was 25,000. So I put 10 grand on because the cost of metal is volatile. The other part, I mean, I've heard from one person, might be 75 grand to clean it. Somebody else, they're more like, it's close to 100 and some odd $1,000. So honestly, I have no idea. And I think they really won't know until they get up there. And I'm really hoping it's not bad. Really, that's my little
prayer. Beth, you should know that you cannot increase your request
here. Oh yeah, I know.
Okay, good. So you've got some.
She added 10,000. But I was really encouraged by the stability of the base that they found. Is that correct? It seemed to me the base is very stable.
Yep.
So that was good news.
Well, thank you both very much for your presentation. Do I see any other questions? Terrific. Thank you for joining us this evening. It's good to see you both.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda. Thank you for your very good questions, committee. This was well done. And it sets a nice pace for the rest of our work. Regional housing.
Oh yeah.
Go ahead, John.
No, I just staff and technical services.
Was that up there? We were supposed to be doing it.
Oh,
it's
on the top.
Sorry, I'm sorry. Just a minute.
We don't need 30 minutes.
No, we sure don't, but, and are you going to be presenting this?
Sure.
Okay,
Yes, since the year 2000, there's been a request for $40,000 for administrative support, which includes staff salaries and the membership in the state coalition, and also signs and that sort of thing. So we're just repeating the same request as the past, and I think you've traditionally funded that.
yes, we have, and my question, this is mine to kind of oversee. You don't think there's been an escalation in any of the costs? I mean, you don't anticipate the state turning to you and saying, well, actually, we need more money from the town?
No, I guess there was a surplus of about 8,500 last year, since I don't think that so they didn't spend money on signs or anything. It was just the staff salary and the membership.
Okay, so we've got some wiggle room if you need it.
That's
then
right. Yes.
Okay, terrific.
What's the maximum that can be requested from CPA funds for administrative expenses like this? Do you
I
remember?
was afraid you might ask that. I know that this is currently 2%, and I know that it's under the state limit, which I think is 5, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
I could look into that.
And I just wonder why not 5?
Right.
That's all. Yeah, it'd be good to know, because that would really help you guys, I think.
And it's also the signage is really not unimportant. Burton noticed as we were going into the cemetery that there was a CPC sign right there from past works that we've undertaken. And that just gives the community, a sense of our good work, the community's good work, and our good support of their work. So getting that signage out and about, as our northern border Canadians might say. Eve, that's a nod to you. Haven't you been just recently in Canada, right? Oot and a boot.
Though, Diane, if I may, I had a thought on that signage, which was, I think it's a good thing as a semi-temporary measure, right? When we've recently done a project, but I've noticed that there's a lot of those signs about town now. And I wonder if maybe what we could do is in the future, we take down signs that have been put up at some places and reuse them in others. It's nice to have a sign and it's nice to remind people, but I think once the project is about 5 years in the rearview mirror, that we might consider moving it around to the next one instead of investing in more signs.
That's a great idea.
I love that idea.
Because they are very nice signs and not cheap.
They're nice signs, but I wouldn't want it to become like, on all the highway signs it says, brought to you by, this highway brought to you by Governor, whatever. I could just, and I just could see a proliferation of the signs, because if we do 10 to 15 projects a year, before you know it, you've got 150 signs in town, and we'd look at an airport.
Our signs, that's
yeah.
Point beautifully made. Thank you, Burton, very, very much. Okay, moving on. Any other questions for Anne in that project? Closing out the following projects: the Regional Housing Service Office, and there is $5,000 remaining. But I noticed, Anne, and I would love some clarification on this, that they tend to use that money to cover other needs. I think the specific language is. Unfortunately, I can't get to that screen right now, but that the language suggests that if there's an extra $5,000, it's used to support other endeavors.
Yes, that's right. But this money has
left in the account after a la carte services of the program's housing staff. So is that where that $5,000 will go, or?
Well, let's see, this is a project from FY 2015, so almost a decade ago, and the money's been sitting there, and I don't know if people didn't realize it, but so I asked Marcia about it, and she said to go ahead and close it out and then reuse this funding for other CPA
other projects, our projects, not the regional housing. Terrific. All right, thank you very much. Does anybody have any other questions about the closing out that particular project? Okay, so we can add $5,000 to our ongoing, our future. budget. That's always good news. And the Buttrick House Gardens, we all remember walking around those that space. And I hope people had a chance to go up and visit it because they've done some nice work.
Could I just say one thing about that project that really astonished me? The mason who did the work on the brick, relaying the brick pathways, numbered every single brick as it came out and put it back the way it was supposed to be. And you can see that level of care in the work that was done. So we should be really proud of that.
It's really beautiful, isn't it? Should the CPC write a note to them commenting on that meticulous care and our appreciation? Do you think, should we add that to the closing out?
That would be great, but everybody should go see it. It's so well done. Really, it's so well done.
Here's the screen.
Yep. Isn't it?
And some of the brickwork.
And there's also the stairs that went down to the lower garden. They did a great job with those, and the railings you can see. So this is really made a huge difference. We should be really proud of that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So I don't think we vote. Oh, help me. I don't think we vote on closing out the projects. We just say thank you very much and close them out. I don't.
Oh, okay.
John, does it require a vote, or Burton, do you know?
I don't know.
Good. We could just do it.
Well, John, do you know?
No, I don't know. It wouldn't seem that we need to. It's administrative task.
That's what I believe. But I can do it this way. If there's any disagreement with closing out those projects, please speak now or forever hold your peace.
No.
So
Okay.
in the letters from the past, it says that, and I just used a blanket letter from the past. It says the committee is unanimously voted to consider the CPA project.
There you go.
Project to be done.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Let's
yes, it was voted on.
Thank you, Anne. So hearing no dissent, let us consider the vote unanimous. Yes, is that okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, terrific. Approval of the minutes. Anne, I noticed a problem with the minutes. And it could be that I misspoke, but it says in the second to last paragraph of the minutes, something about 3 areas in which monies can be given. It's actually 4 areas in which monies can be given.
Okay.
And I just want to make sure that that correction is made.
Okay.
Did anybody else see anything in the minutes?
I sent Anna a minor comment. It doesn't change the content of the minutes.
Thank you, Sarah. I wanted to say this one publicly rather than just sending a note so that we would all understand that that was I thought a rather significant change.
I have one comment and one question.
Terrific.
It may be redundant. In the introductory paragraph, and you'll note that there's a theme to my commentary here, where we're discussing private individuals. I think that is accurate as stated, but I'd like to add, if possible, because I think in our discussion there was a bit of a nuanced discussion that we would like individuals to bring project ideas forward. And those individuals cannot be funded without, town support and town departments, but in isolation, it just looks like we're discouraging private individuals. So if we could add a clause, something to the effect, while individuals are encouraged to bring ideas forward, then private individuals are ineligible for direct funding, something like that, Diane.
Okay, yeah, this gets complicated, doesn't it? Yes, Nancy?
I have not checked the law exactly for the wording, but I consulted with a friend of mine who is an attorney for Historic New England and been CPC and everything else in Lexington. And she said there's nothing in the law that prohibits individuals from applying, but it's extraordinarily rare, if at all. But there's nothing in the law that precludes them. So it's very hard for an individual to document public benefit. But if we're talking about just the preservation of the exterior of a building, perhaps that provides public benefit.
I think, Paul, it means something slightly different, don't you, Paul?
Yeah.
Just by
I'm thinking-
exemplification, a little bit different. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I think we and I want to encourage individuals to get involved in facilitated taxes and to bring ideas forward and to team with others. You know, we have one of those applications, we'll consider it another point. So I don't know, I'd like that wording. It's different when what you were discussing, Nancy. There may not be a prohibition in the law.
It's a different
But
topic.
I would like to encourage individuals from bringing forward ideas rather than have them sit back and let the town departments take the lead in all instances. So it may not, something.
I agree with that.
Something in the minutes to
May I
that
make a
effect.
suggestion then? Maybe the wording, perhaps the wording might be something like, with collaboration with the town, with sufficient time for their budgeting process and consideration, individuals may. Because that's really key here, because we know that budgets are established, that the town, offices are very busy, and that to impose something on them without careful kind of building up of the project in advance can be problematic for them. So maybe if we put that language in. Now, John is shaking his head. No, 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 no. So
Well,
John, your turn. Go ahead.
No, I
Wait,
yeah, no, I just agree. I agree with Paul. I think a general encouragement, without all the specifics, will help people get started, and then they'll get appropriate guidance from us and from Anne as to how to move their ideas forward. But I really, we've had 3 now the last 2 years, and I think they all, I can't remember if they all got headed. No, one didn't go anywhere. One went in the right direction. Then we've got one in front of us to talk with. So I like the general proposition that Paul's put forward.
There you go.
Yeah, I like it, except for the excluding individuals from applying. And that's easy to take out.
Burton?
I've missed a couple of conversations, but what I'm hearing is that the town needs to be involved in all of these, or being sponsored in one way or another. And I don't think that's been the case. And I don't think that's a requirement of the law. I mean, I think about folks like the Masons or the first parish and all those were not town projects. I think where we have run into problems is when there's no organization with a bank account and a history of financial strength or whatever that we look at. It's some individuals who have come together informally. But I think we need to be clear that it doesn't need to be a town organization. That's the difference really about CPC versus the rest of the town budget in some respect.
Absolutely. I think the difficulty is when it's on town land.
Yeah.
And we're asking the town.
I get that's okay.
Asking the town to do the work.
Conversation.
It's that kind of distinction, subtle though it may be, that really becomes to some degree an issue. I mean, we have a lot to talk about in relationship to that, but I mean, I think that the more that we can talk about,
I understand.
planning and collaboration is a good idea. Yeah,
So
John.
remembering that this was the minutes, and I don't think we ought to establish rules in the minutes. So I want to support John's support of me and just,
And I want to say furthermore.
it's just, add something to encourage people to bring forward ideas, and then they'll
See where they go.
In our CPC,
yeah,
our 2022 CPC plan, it articulates this pretty well.
Yeah, it sure does. And there's the only cautionary note is if it's town land, or if we're expecting a town organization to undertake the work. and then that gets a little more complicated. But Nancy.
Oh, I didn't take my hand down. I'm sorry. Nothing.
This is good. And I don't, you might want to send around, are we ready to vote on the minutes, or do we want to see an emendation in terms of language before we do?
I would just like to propose a very simple clause to add to that, just something like, while individuals are encouraged to bring projects forward, then you can continue with what's there. Private individuals are not funded. which may not, maybe to
Right.
Nancy's point, we may not want to have that in there.
Yeah, I would take that out until we're clear, because this person, I think, is pretty expert in the law.
Okay.
Well, this is an important
Take
issue.
that part out.
Paul's been, I've been teasing him about it, but Paul's been talking about this really now for a year and a half. And it's very important.
Yeah.
It and vet it appropriately and get the right language into our work, Paul. I mean, it really is very important. So before we take so may I hear
What and then I had one question.
Oh.
Okay. Towards the end of the minutes, it basically says we're going to take a vote on the 2022 CPC plan, which is still hanging out there.
that's right,
So,
because we have not yet received a full emendation of that, Paul. When we get it, we will.
okay, so can we put that on the agenda for upcoming meetings, so we kind of get that?
That would be terrific.
Thank you.
And then when it's completed, Anne, maybe you'd scoot it out to all of us so that we can review it with a good red pencil in our hands. So that would be terrific. May I hear a vote to accept the minutes, please?
Well, as amended, do we know as amended? If so,
As slightly amended, yes. As amended. Nancy, you vote yes?
I make the motion.
And Burton
I
seconded.
second that, please.
Okay. May I, so we're going to go around and do a roll call. Nancy?
Yes, I suppose.
Sarah?
As amended, I'm sorry.
Right, as amended. Burton?
Yes.
Eve?
Yes, but I wasn't at this meeting, so I'm not really sure if I get to say yes.
Oh, never mind. Yes, yeah. John?
Oh, as amended, yes.
Yes. Says the ally. Go ahead, Paul.
Yes.
And Andrew, you weren't at the meeting. Yes, were you?
Charles?
No, I don't think you were.
Yes.
Charles? Yes, okay, and I as well. So for all those present, and I vote. Eve, I want to particularly welcome you. This is, it is great to have you on this committee. You asked some very good questions today. You can see that we look at these projects and these applications in a great deal of detail.
It's fun.
Yeah, it's really important because sometimes we get involved and discover that we haven't asked those probing questions early on. And then we're alarmed by something that's happening or just concerned. Maybe alarmed is too strong a word. So
Thank you.
Dee Ortner is here observing for FinCom. Dee, do you have any comments? And she's incidentally was the chair of this committee and she knows the work of the CPC inside and out. Dee, do you have anything any comments you'd like to add?
Oh, thank you for asking me. I really don't have any comments. I'm very impressed with the applications as well as the series of questions that have been asked tonight. So I can't wait till next week, till the next meeting.
Stay tuned.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dee. All right, may I have a motion? John, your hand is raised. Is that?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I just wanted I have October 18th as the next meeting. Is that?
Let me look at my calendar. Hold on. My very sophisticated calendar.
Oh, Diane. Oh, yes.
Yes, I have October 18th as our next meeting.
Right.
May I hear a motion to
So
okay, thank you. It's seconded by anybody?
Second.
Second, okay. We've learned that we don't have to take a vote on this. So thank you all for your time. What a great group. Okay.
Good evening.
Thank you, Diane.
See you
Good
next,
night.
see you on
Good
the
night.
October. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Ann.
Bye, everybody.